Thanks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Council Chambers on this February 10th. And what a beautiful day it is. If you've been outside lately, welcome to spring, or sort of spring, I'm not too sure. I'm getting the seasons mixed up with all the wacky weather that we're having. So right now we have spring, so enjoy it while it lasts, because winter might come again once in a while. Council, before you have an agenda, there is one addition. Deputy Mayor, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Council accept the meeting agenda for Monday, February 10th, 2020, with the addition of FCM West update in closed meeting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Administration, anything else to add? Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, moving on is our public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on anything that's not on the agenda. Is there anybody in chambers like to make a comment to council, suggestion, or concern? Okay, see none. We'll move on. There's no presentations or delegations today. There's also no statutory public hearings. So moving straight into the adoption of council minutes, 6.1, 6.2. Councillor Bennett, please.
I move the Town Council approve the Town Council meeting minutes as presented.
Okay. Members of council, you had a chance to read it. Any errors or omissions or questions regarding those? Okay. I didn't see any either, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to committee boards, commissions, and committee minutes. 7.1 to 7.4, Councillor Matties.
The Town Council received the council boards and committee meeting minutes for information.
Okay. So members of council, all 4 meeting minutes are up for discussion and questions. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about 7.3, the GNCC. First of all, as I was reading it, I am on page 35 of 276, and 6.1, the housing strategy alternatives overview. First of all, it says move the town council accept the housing strategy alternatives for information.
Yeah, Your Worship, I believe that should probably be the committee.
The committee, yeah.
Okay. That should be the committee. So that was page 35.
34.
34.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Also, Mr. Mayor, I just am curious as to why the Growth and Commerce Committee is discussing housing strategy alternatives. And the information that's provided here, I think would be of interest to several of us who are dealing with affordable housing projects here. And so could I just ask what initiated the discussion in this committee meeting?
Okay. I'll go ahead to any of the members that sit on the GCC, which is Councillor Matties, Deputy Mayor Pelechko, and Councillor Laurie. Any comments?
I can make one comment with regards to housing strategies and basically looking at the cost of living and, in terms of our community, making sure that we have suitable housing that individuals can afford. But secondly, that also looking at maybe partnerships with developers and working towards, some strategies where we can work in partnership with others to create this type of an opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And it's also part of, comes from our MDP as well, so to provide all different types of housing markets that are available for our residents in the town of Stony Plain. So again, this is also an economic driver as well, to provide different options for residents instead of just having one size fits all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That explains part of it for me. And I'm assuming, and I know, I read through the new MDP, and I know housing is part of that. But some of the information that's listed here, I'm just wondering if administration was planning on bringing any of that information to town council so that we all have that same sort of information.
Your worship, again, I would maybe back up a little bit further. So, you mean housing or residential development has been a topic at the Growth and Commerce Committee for I mean, going back probably a year, if not more. Various ways. I think this is, you know, this particular set of minutes captures some of it, but it would even go back to, you know, that's where some policies for residential infill were developed or seen through or steered through or whatever term you want to call it. So it's always been a topic at that committee level. I believe too at the last meeting there was further discussion on some other housing related topics, I guess is the way I would put it. So specifically to the question, at this point, no, the work was still being tabled at the committee. Again, the way it would work would be if the committee saw fit to recommend any change in town policy, that would come to the council chambers for debate, approval, amendments, so on and so forth. And that being said, Your Worship, the other thing I would add is that there's certainly, you know, I mean, any particular council member, if they wish, would be able to, you know, talk to one of their counterparts or come down and talk to myself or our economic development officer who staffs that committee, so to speak, and get further updates as to what's going on or how or why and so on and so forth, Your Worship. I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you. Again, Councilor Bennett, it is a committee, so the committee has work to do, and one of that work is looking at the growth of our community, and housing strategy is one of them. And if any policies that need to be changed or adjusted so that we can kind of track some of that, then it all has come back to council, because council is the overarching body that approves and not approves any policies, bylaws, procedures that come through.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad that we do see committee meeting minutes from different committees, just so that we know what is happening and what all of our committees are working on. So thank you for that information.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Matties, go ahead.
Your Worship, I just would like the representative from the Stony Plain Library just to give us a bit of an update regarding the new library and some of the fundraising. Are you on track with it?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we on track with it? It's always a moving target, actually, when it comes to fundraising for different buildings. We do have a fundraising committee set up. We're working with the Friends of the Library for their input, and actually they're kind of taking the lead on the fundraising. We've met, there was a meeting just a couple weeks ago between our administration and some of the people on the building committee. And so I think now we are on target, and there's always the controversy or the decision as to whether or not to hire a campaign manager, a professional to do that job. That's always a bit of a conversation, discussion that you have to have, because it's a fair bit of money to do that. But we're working well with our administration, and I think that that's going to work itself out, and we're going to be knocking on doors very soon. Mr. Mayor, if I could just take this opportunity to talk to council about the two major campaign initiatives that we have going on in this community. And fortunately or unfortunately for all of you, I'm not sure, I'm on both boards. And so I have this kind of background information as to what's happening. And I think that you all know that I'm out there and I'm on the capital campaign committee for the Meridian Housing Foundation as a volunteer. But Mr. Mayor, you know, I think these two projects, I hate to think that they're going to be in competition with each other. And so I'm going to try and work on that to make sure that both capital campaigns get well funded or funded for as much as they need. But Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask help from all of my council members. They have different connections. They know different people than I know in town. And so I think that it's a team effort here, that all of us could be thinking about these two major capital projects, the library and the Meridian Housing Foundation Affordable Project. And talk to your contacts and see what they, and talk to them about the projects and see what other community members would come forward to help to donate and raise the funds. The library, Mr. Hill, do you know exactly how much the library is now seeking for their capital campaign?
Your worship, members of council, so we had a meeting today and we're still finalizing that, and I think when they launch their fundraising campaign, that will be publicized.
Thank you. Meridian Housing Foundation is 1.5 million. The Knights of Columbus of the area is holding a fundraiser for May 16th. Councillor Meyer is on that committee as a volunteer, and he's going to be working with that group of people to help us to have a dinner, entertainment, live and silent auction. So again, I'll just appeal to my colleagues here on council, when you're out and about, if you could ask some of your contacts for even silent auction, live auction items, and then contact myself or Glenn O'Neill, if you know him, so that we can make this a really successful fundraising effort.
Thank you for that, Councilor Bennett. Any other questions, comments regarding the council boards, commissions, and committee minutes? Okay. See none. I have a question for Councilor Mattis that sits on the Stony Plain FCSS, the Family and Community Support Services. I noticed in the minutes there was the 9th of October and then December 11th. And there was also mentioned that the November one was canceled, but there was no indication of why it was canceled.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. No, I honestly don't understand, because I thought we had a November meeting and we had a December meeting, but just don't quite under.
Okay, if you can find out
Let me
first,
find out. Yeah,
and then-
I'm sorry. I just, off the top of my head, I'm just surprised. I don't know why.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then maybe a comment for Councillor Bennett on the Meridian Housing Foundation. First of all, congratulations on being appointed, elected chair of the foundation. Another thing is, I noticed in the minutes, the executive director was tasked at looking at a housing needs assessment. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to just provide some maybe information and support to that as well. The Capital Region Board did a housing needs assessment for the region, so they would have a lot of that legwork already done, so that'd be a good start for the Meridian Housing Foundation. If I'll get you guys connected with the executive director, our CEO of the MRB, to connect and then provide that information to the board so that you guys have a base to start from.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have actually hired a consultant to do that needs assessment. It's very specifically for our region, and we're going to find out, I think, lots of information there, but mostly what we need to see is the seniors portion and what exactly this region needs for housing. If I can explain a little bit more, Mr. Mayor. As you know, the business case for the Meridian Housing Foundation indicates a lodge for Spruce Grove in the hopefully very near future. But we've been getting some questions from some of our other municipalities as to whether or not that is really needed. And so that's one of the specific goals of this housing foundation, of this housing assessment.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
But I will let the consultants know that Capital Region Board did do this.
Thank you, and if you just pass along my name and contact information, if they want it, I will connect them with the EMR to have that done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do not have any more questions regarding the boards, commissions, and committee minutes. Anybody else have anything? No. Okay, so back to the motion from Councilor Matty. So all in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to bylaws 8.1. This is our MDP update. And I will turn it over to staff. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. In front of you today, we have the first reading of the bylaw, which is the Uniquely Stony Plain Municipal Development Plan 2020 update, which administration's been working on for the past year. At this time, I'll just give you a few comments about the process here. So typically at first reading, we don't give a large presentation. However, given the significance of the MDP, we do have a presentation tonight. And then the motion is to move forward with advertising for a public hearing to be held in April. The reason for the April date is we must submit this to the EMRB, and there's a 9-week period with which that process will take place, and so the timing of April 27th is to coincide with allowing that to happen. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Ms. Rudolph, who has a presentation, and then we welcome any questions.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight we are presenting Uniquely Stony Plain Municipal Development Plan in 2020. This presentation will cover project background, the purpose of why we were doing the project, the process that we took to complete the project, and we'll have some discussion if there's any questions or comments. So the Municipal Development Plan is the town's framework for future growth. It sets the vision and goals for municipal development to establish a roadmap for sustainable land management over the next 30 years. On our municipal land use planning framework, this sits in the municipal planning area, providing broad policies to guide development across the entire town. So why are we completing this project? The major reason is to comply with our overarching policy document. So the Municipal Government Act is our overarching provincial legislation, and the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board is our overarching regional legislation. And in line with this, is based on direction from the Regional Context Statement, which we completed in 2018. Another thing that you will notice is different in this version of the document is the vision. So the image you see on the left-hand side was the vision in the existing municipal development plan, and through workshops with council, we generated the statement on the right-hand side of the page. So that's what you will see in the draft of the document attached to this council package. We completed some administrative updates. This includes general text changes to improve language and readability. We updated statistics for growth management and employment forecasts, and we also restructured certain sections to accommodate the new policies that we added to the document. So this is a general overview of the timeline that occurred for this project. It took place in 3 major phases. The first ran from April to August of 2019, which included the project launch, the visioning session with council, and a policy analysis. The second phase ran from September to December of 2019, which included completing the administrative updates, generating the draft, and holding some public participation. And the third phase, which we are in right now, running from January to May of 2020, was receiving draft comments, completing the final edits, and submitting to approval authorities. And there are some key dates on the left-hand side there. So the regional context statement took place before the municipal development plan update started. So that was in October of 2018. And from there, all the other dates are when we brought this document to council for information. You'll see there's a public open house, and then the date that we're here for first reading. To dive a little bit deeper into the details of the process that we followed, as mentioned, the first part that kicked off this entire project was completing the regional context statement. So in October of 2018, council approved our regional context statement, which identified which areas we needed to strengthen to comply with the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan. So those 4 policy areas were environment and sustainability, economic development, housing, and agricultural lands. Next, we hired a consultant to complete a best practice policy analysis. So with those 4 areas that we identified needed strengthening, we looked at some surrounding municipalities of comparable sizes to see how they were handling some of those issues. And as a result of this report, there were some policy recommendations made for how Stony Plain might address these issues with this update. From there, we completed the administrative updates, which included things like updating the density targets and statistics. So those were things that came down from the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan. We also updated sections to align with some newly adopted plans. So the biggest example of this was the Old Town Community Plan. You notice that the areas of transition changed most significantly to accommodate some of the areas that are now covered in the Old Town Community Plan at a finer level of detail. We made some map changes, and as mentioned, we did some general text updates and restructuring to accommodate the new policy changes and recommendations that were made by our consultants. We made some changes to some graphic updates. We also have a consultant helping us with this. So we updated some of the images that were a little bit outdated and restructured some areas to accommodate new policies and make the document a little bit easier to read. So there weren't too many things happening on certain pages. So we needed some graphic expertise to help us with that. And what's happened since the last time that we were here reporting for information, we conducted public participation. We hosted a public open house on December 3rd, 2019 in council chambers to convey major document changes and gather feedback on those changes. The 2 images at the bottom of the screen are examples of some of the panels that we had in the room and some of the comments that we received. As a result of some of the feedback we got on December 4th, the day following the open house, we created those panels in an online format and put them on our website, essentially in kind of a survey format to extend the opportunity for public participation. So that was live on our website until January 10th, 2020. And from January 10th, 2020 to the date that the document gets approved, we will be reporting what we heard through that public participation period. And there is an attachment in this council package with a table that shows all of the comments that we received, if there were actions warranted dependent on the comment, and if there were, how we did address those in this latest draft. So what are the next steps from here? Tonight we're at first reading, so once this document receives first reading, we will submit it to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board for approval. And once that gets approved, we will be back here at council for a public hearing, second and third reading, hopefully sometime in April. So with that, we will take any questions or comments if you have any. Thank you.
Before I ask for a motion, can I just get you to highlight some of the major changes?
For sure. So through your worship to all of council, I would say some of the biggest changes are the vision statement 1, which you guys are all aware of, and certain sections, for example, section 2 changed a lot to accommodate the new affordable housing policies. So that's a big one. And also one that I mentioned was the areas of transition that look significantly different now because so many of those details were covered in the Old Town Community Plan at a finer level of detail. So we kind of backed that out and generalized it a little bit. those I'd say would be the biggest things that you'll notice as a difference between the existing MDP and the draft.
Good. And can you provide some commentary on how the open house was?
Through your worship to all of council, the open house went very well. We designed the questions to kind of get at what people valued within those 4 big policy areas that we changed. So as you can see in the attachment of the comments of what we heard, it was really interesting to see what people really respect or appreciated about all of those aspects in Stony Plain, but then also to get their feedback on how we might address those things a little bit better, how we might tackle those things moving forward in this draft, because there were a number of those topics like affordable housing or agricultural lands that we didn't have a lot of emphasis on in the existing draft. So I think it was really valuable to hear what people valued about those things and then give some suggestions for how those things might be presented and experienced in Stony Plain moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So, Councilor Laurie, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council A gives first reading to bylaw 2631/DMP/20 for the purpose of adopting an updated municipal development plan. B, authorizes administration to submit the draft municipal development plan to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board, EMRB, for approval. And C, authorizes administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of the public hearing to be held April 27th, 2020.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councilor Laurie. So members of council, we had a nice report from administration and some highlights of what's been suggested to change for the update. Any questions and comments regarding some of those? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's more of a clarification question in respect to the continuation of this. Given the significance of this document, the significance of the reporting, the build up to this, the fact it has to go to EMRB for the approval and then come back. I know traditionally when we have our public hearings, we will usually do second and third reading in the same evening. I'm curious with this, given the magnitude of this document, if there's been consideration to having second and third readings on different nights, so that depending on the information that comes out of the public hearing and depending on the commentary from council afterwards, given that this is only first reading and don't want to get too deep into it to begin with, that there'll be time for administration to actually react and put some potential changes in before the document comes to us to third reading. So has that been contemplated? Is that the plan, or is that something maybe that if we were originally looking at reading 2 and 3 on the 27th of April, is it something we can look to modify?
Your Worship, through you to Councilor Laurie. So at the public hearing, we would be listening and it would be the will of council to either give second reading and then make further changes or not. So that is within council's purview, and I guess we would wait to hear from the public on at the public hearing and then gauge it with that, whether second and third is at the same time or whether it's delayed.
Okay. So for members of council, when this does come back, it will be scheduled for second and third reading at the same time. And if there's enough input and conversation that needs to change the actual script or the meat of the document, council can pass second reading and then not do anything with third reading, then that automatically sends it back to administration to fine tune it and then come back on another day. That way, if there's no major changes, then we can approve second and third the same evening. Thank you. Yeah, and just that's been done that way so that we don't have set a month apart where if there's no changes, then you're still waiting a month to adopt third reading. Yeah. So council always has that privy and the ability to not do third reading and send it back. Any other questions? Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I thought this report was excellent. And it was really good. I couldn't put it down. The final report that was included in this package was analyzed by Stantec, I believe. And they made some very good points. I really thought the comparisons to the other communities were right on, and we needed that. But my questions tonight, Mr. Mayor, really have to do with the agriculture portion of what the final report was alluding to. especially the ramp. I didn't really see a lot of those changes in the municipal development plan as presented in this package, so I wanted some comments about that. Also the focus on urban agriculture that was included in the final report was right, very relevant, seeing as we've had at least 2, if not 3, members of our public in just the last few council meetings come to us and talk to us about beekeeping, community gardens, those kinds of things. And so I really didn't see a part, and I might have missed it, Mr. Mayor, in our MDP that really spoke to those issues that were in the final report.
Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bennett. There were a few agriculture-related policies that we did add to the future urban development area of the MDP, so that's where you'll notice the most changes in this area. It was tough because the policy analysis was specifically looking at what other municipalities are currently doing, acknowledging that some of those communities are a little bit more rural than we are. We were trying to find an approach in the meantime because the ramp is not finalized yet. So there is also a section in the attachment of the changes that we made where we're being updated with kind of the direction that the ramp is going and some policies that are coming down the pipe with that. So we're also trying to accommodate some of those larger things that are happening right now, acknowledging that the ramp isn't complete yet. So that is an area that we could look at a little bit deeper, but it's going to be tough to determine exactly how to fully satisfy those things until that plan is complete.
Okay, thank you. And for members of council, the reference page number is page 123 of 275 and also 124. It talks a lot about the future urban agriculture, and there's also, I forget which one it is, let me find it. It's, yes, about monitoring and developing with adjacent municipalities, so they're concurrent, and also direct all growth to non-prime agricultural lands before prime agricultural lands, considering. So there is some of that in there, and that's on page 123 and 124. Councillor Matthews?
Yes, Your Worship, I have a couple of comments. I'm just going to page 68 of 276, and this is where we talk about community sustainability and future growth, and the Edmonton Metro Regional Board's estimate regarding Stony Plain's population will reach 32,000 by 2044. What that is basically indicating that would be about a 2.5% growth rate for Stony Plain, and that's based on past numbers. So right now we're looking at that 1% mark over the last few years, and as a community we know that we've got a lot of good strategies in place that we're going to facilitate growth moving forward, but we want to keep that in mind as we have a direction like this, because it definitely means that we need to work towards that, right, from where we are today. And the second comment is with regards to page 77. And this is regarding the recognition of the town's commitment to the health of our environment. And if we look at 1-1-A on page 77, it says the town will promote education, awareness, community stewardship, protect and enhance the natural environment, reduce non-renewable energy use, address climate change, and waste management. One thing that's missing here, and just to kind of give you a brief background, I was at the AUMA Sustainability Environment Committee on Friday, and we had a guest speaker, Andre Asselin. He's the Executive Director of the Alberta Water Council and the Clean Air Strategic Alliance. And he said that municipalities need to be aware that the federal standards on air quality will be I guess either presented January of 2020, so this month coming up. And what the comments, he speaks very, very quickly, but he indicated that what's regulated right now is all the big emitters, but what's not currently regulated is what's coming out of our buildings, our vehicles, wildfires, those types of things. And he said that if the provincial standards are met, then all standards are met. And he said that Alberta will be establishing the levels and municipalities will be required to comply to the legislation. So with this, what I would love to see in here is just a note that in accordance with applicable provincial acts and regulations, because I mean, with environmental responsibility, I mean, there's going to be many facets to that, but if we could consider placing that, that would be very helpful. Because it would cover it all, basically.
Okay. So thank you for the comment, Councillor Matty. So the comment is to add following provincial federal guidelines where applicable,
Yeah,
somewhere.
or regulation, right? Yeah, where applicable. Or as required. Or in accordance with applicable provincial acts and regulations.
Okay, so that comment, and the staff will take that. If it needs to be worded, then they will. And if if they feel it's covered someplace else, they will not put it in there. Okay, any other questions and comments regarding this? Okay, Councillor Meyer?
Just a quick one. Just going to page 86, economic opportunity. Now I do see in the earlier part of the report, we do speak about this town being a connected community, and I imagine that is in reference to our being situated along two major roadways. Anyhow, I just don't see sort of a corresponding point in economic opportunity that sort of drives home that opportunity. Maybe I'm just missing it. Maybe somebody could just explain to me how we kind of capture that and follow it through to the economic opportunity section. But I thought transportation, I know, is looking at our statistics, one of the major employers in this town. And like I say, I know I've been told prior, one of our advantages is where we lie along those roads. So I'm just curious to see it in the economic section.
Okay.
Or why it wouldn't be, sorry.
Okay, yeah, so good question. So a comment from Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Meyer. So any of these questions we will bring back at the public hearing, and then all of the public will be able to hear the answers as well. So, but thank you for that question. We'll provide the context at the public hearing.
Okay. Connected communities, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so I have a couple comments. It's a really good report. I enjoyed reading it. It's interesting to see this vision play itself out in the next 25 to 30 years. So when we revisit this vision, is not what we are today, is about where we will be as a town, city, county, or specialized municipality in 25 to 30 years from now. And when you look at some of these goals, you think the town Stony Plain will never be able to achieve this. That's correct, if you're looking at today's standards, if you're looking at what we're doing today. But it is to provide the goal for us to plan to get to where we need to be. And I think this lays out the groundwork very, very well. So thank you. I enjoyed the pictures, and I liked the fact that it kind of meshes well with the wording. I do have a question on page 116. I grew up in this community, and I ridden my bike everywhere, and I drive my car around everywhere just to check things out. But I cannot figure out where these two places are out of the documents. So page 116, so 116. There is, in the far right-hand corner, there is a divided laneway, arterial, with trees and grass in the middle. I've been here since 1980, and I have not yet seen that in our community, unless there's a an alternate reality of Stony Plain for 2020 that has that, I don't know where that is.
It's noted, Your Worship.
Okay, and the same with the second picture there. That is an apartment building that I have never seen in our community either. So if this is uniquely Stony Plain MTP, then all the pictures should be, and I'll be looking for it because I have a good memory of pictures that focus on Stony Plain.
That's a new one we're planning.
Thank you, Councilor Matty. Councilor Matty says that the picture of the apartment is the new one that, that the Marine Foundation will be building. So that's a good visual of it. Is that true, Councilor Bennett?
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll research those two photographs and check into that.
Thank you. And also on page 126, I have to thank my teachers. It was upside down, but my teachers taught me how to read, and I was able to read it upside down, which is very good. So thank a teacher if you could have read that. Great job. Councilor Matters, you had your hand up.
Yes, I do. I just get to my page. So on page 88, which is direction 4-1-D, the town will encourage traffic calming features in the design of new and existing roads. I sure would like to see the words traffic efficiency and traffic calming, because we have to have an efficient system where we can move from place to place, as well as some calming, which slows things down a little bit, but we need to be able to get from one end of town to the other with relative efficiency. So just a comment that it's just one side, but it's not describing the efficiency of it. And then secondly, on page 93, under 5-3-D, I'm just trying to get clarification as to what exactly this means. The town will encourage lifelong learning opportunities for leisure. What does that mean exactly?
Your Worship, through you to Councilor Matty. So I guess that's a visionary statement that the town will encourage both leisure opportunities for people to learn with varied activities through leisure, and also through any post-secondary opportunities which may involve a sense of community and of engaging with each other, interacting with each other.
Okay.
If you wanted to, I'm not sure whether that provides the clarity you're looking for. But
To me, when I read that that paragraph, to me it meant the town was going to have facilities and amenities that allowed residents to learn leisure activities. For example, is pickleball. 10 years ago, nobody knew what the hell. Well, sorry, can't say that. What the heck pickleball was. Sorry, my apologies. What the heck pickleball was until I tried it and people came and presented to us. So that's like a learning activity that I participated in. Actually, I find it very enjoyable. It's a little bit easier on your body versus tennis or racquetball or squash, and it's mixed between badminton and tennis. And then even post-secondary education, we used to have Northwest College Unit out here that has, again, throughout their revamping, has closed their doors, and they're doing more online. That might be like something that we achieve to in the next 25 to 30 years, is to have post-secondary education out here so that people don't have to drive into the city.
I would just suggest we just take the lifelong out of there, because it's learning opportunities for leisure, and post-secondary education would probably, it's not. Well, lifelong is, I mean, it just doesn't make sense with regards to leisure or education for that matter.
Yeah. All right. Okay, thank you for your comments. Councilor Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at the participation comments, starting on, I believe it's page 260. Could I ask, was the public see, what's it called? Yeah, the public participation comments. Were they invited guests to the public participation? In other words, what I'm asking is, we had an MPC committee, and so I'm wondering if those members of that committee had been, or that commission actually, had been invited to comment on this. I was just noticing when I went through the comments, how right on they are and how insightful they are into exactly what an MDP is. And so I was curious as to who were these members of the public that commented on this?
Right, good question. Go ahead.
Through your worship to all of council, there were specific invitations sent out to all councillors and to the former MPC members as well. All the other advertising was done on our website and through our social media channels, so there were a mix of committee members, councillors, residents, staff, and also individuals from our development community who did attend this event and provide comments. So you'll probably notice that some are more specific to certain lenses of where they were focusing their comments on the document, but I think overall we had a good representation and voice from all of those groups. But I agree with you, the comments were really well done, and like I said, we value all of those perspectives.
So then my next question, Mr. Mayor, is when we have our public hearing, I think in April, will our public be able to understand and know some of the changes that have gone on in this process? If we're going to have a public hearing and we want to hear from our public about our new MDP or our updated MDP, how can we get the best kind of questions out of our public unless they know exactly some of the changes that have been made and why it's been made?
Okay, so I'm guessing administration has the presentation about the changes?
All of council here, so the documents in front of you today are in the public domain now, so it's out there for people to read and absorb as they see fit to prepare themselves for the questions for the public hearing.
And of course, they can also come in and talk to our administration and get some clearer understanding.
Yes.
Yeah, your worship, maybe just I'll add a bit to that too. I think, if I could interpret Councillor Bennett's question there, you know, oftentimes when we go out into the public, we try to phrase the question, listen to hear what's important to the public. And then our staff and council to an extent has to then, somewhat translate it into how it fits in these particular documents. And the staff do their best, I think, to take those comments that are sometimes generalized, most of the time not specific like some of these ones are, and try to group them into what kind of potential change should be added to the municipal development plan. And excuse me, and to an extent it is a challenge, but I think our staff didn't mention that, when we try to ask questions about what's important to them in this theme and then hear that answer and then see where it may or may not fit within the, the technical documents or the policy numbers and so on and so forth. But, it can be a challenge. That's part of why I think, the attempt is to have this thing out in the public for quite some time. Frankly, it's been discussed for almost a year and a half now. But it will, at certain points, it does have some technical jargon in it that has to be kind of translated. So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, good questions, good comments, council. Any other questions, comments regarding the revised MDP? Go ahead, Councilor Meyer.
Just in regard to, on page 117, 6.5.1.1, to ensure the residential development is in harmony with nature, design must integrate natural features to provide opportunities to connect with nature and encourage biodiversity where feasible. Now, just talking to the rest of the council here, this is more a comment, but just a consideration here. When we were approving the Tussock area structure plan, and they were talking about moving the creek, and I tried to point out that, you know, if we're getting less creek, then that's a loss for us. We're gonna have to make that up somewhere. Our development officer, I believe, was it a development officer? Miles, pointed out that this would allow us to squeeze more lots onto the land, and the benefit to the town is that would provide more, we'd be able to get more tax money out of it, basically, the efficiency of the use of the land. Anyhow, when we write where feasible in that comment, 6.5.1.1, I would just say a developer could always make it not feasible. You could always come up with a economic reason, like, for example, we need to squeeze more lots out of that. That's a feasibility thing that if we stick feasible in there, it almost defeats that point where you are now saying it's not about harmony with nature or design, it's about whether we can afford it or not. And I can appreciate a developer that would be prime on their list of concerns, but I wonder if when we put the word feasible in there, if that doesn't just create an out for meeting that point.
Okay. That's a good comment, Councillor Meyer, and something for staff to consider, and also members of council as well. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead.
Your worship, to administration, I have a question regarding page 116 of 276, and it's under 6-5H-11, which it says a fine-grained modified grid pattern. I understand what a grid pattern is, but I don't know what a fine-grained one would be.
Through your worship to Councillor Maddies, it's definitely one of those terms, planner terms that we use that isn't easily translated, but I think the best way to describe that is instead of having large streets with lots of very segmented access points, that you have kind of these smaller lots and lots of smaller developments, like almost think of Main Street. So you kind of have this finer street pattern that's a little bit easier to walk to, a little bit easier to access. You have smaller, more human scale buildings, so it makes the whole atmosphere more pleasant to be in from a pedestrian standpoint, as opposed to when you think about along your very wide main roads, like your more car oriented developments. So those are two very different styles of developments catering to kind of two different demographics. But when we say fine grained, almost think of your like European cities where everything is very close together and kind of your higher density, you can access more services in a smaller area. Does that make sense?
Well, your definition makes sense, but how does that apply to new residential development? Like, so where would that apply in the community? And what would it look like?
I can provide an example of that. So one of the things that we talk about in the overall design of a master plan is to have kind of like villages, like seniors villages, where it is confined so that it's kind of like a Main Street, the roads are a little bit smaller and a little bit narrow, so that residents that are in there, mostly seniors, that's why it's called the seniors village, are able to walk back and forth to all their amenities and needs without having to get into a vehicle and car and drive. So very similar to, as the planner suggested, a lot of European cities which have developed over time, their center core is very, very small. The roads are very narrow. Usually there are one-way traffic, but it's more directed to pedestrian-friendly versus vehicle-friendly. In North America, we've always been focusing on vehicle-friendly neighborhoods and not pedestrian-friendly. So I think those are the two. So we'll make sure that we do have the grid pattern for our cars and stuff, but then within that, to have it more of like a multi-grain, so that's how it's walkable, instead of that you don't have to sit in your car and drive to one part of the subdivision.
The rest of that, 6.5, H3, 4, 5, and 6, all tie into what they're trying to describe there. So it's a grid pattern that ties everything together. And if you just continuous connections, the multi-use trails, it becomes a very tight-knit transportation system.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, any other questions and comments regarding this before we approve first reading, so we can go up to the public and advertise for the public hearing? Okay. See none, that was Councillor Laurie that made the motion, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. And that is carried. Moving forward, that ends our our agenda items. Moving on to business items, we do not have any. Now we're moving on to council information and council discussion. Councillor Meyer, please. Anything to inform council about?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Laurie, please.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Councillor Matties.
If you could just go to somebody else for a moment, I just might have a couple comments.
Right. Councillor Loy. Oh, he'll take a pass too? Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Back to Councillor Matties.
I am not going to add, and we'll add next time.
Okay, so with that, I'm just going to highlight a few things that are happening in our community for the next couple of weeks before our next council meeting. February 12th is the Pioneer Museum is having the grand opening of their model train. I believe that's 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock that afternoon. There might be some conflicts of schedule. 3 of us have a tri-regional plan meeting along with City Spruce Grove and Parkland County, so we might not be there. But if I'm not, I'll make sure I'll send somebody to say a few words of congratulations and recognition for the Pioneer Museum. As well, on the 12th is another transit pop-up public event, and that'll be happening at the Stony Plain Library. On the 13th is the Chamber's Luncheon. This is one of the first luncheons that the Chamber has had as the Greater Parkland Regional Chamber, so if you have the opportunity to make sure you're there. I will not be there. I'll be at AMRB that day. Also on the 14th is the Multicultural Center's Valentine Tea. I think this is a tea where they recognize people that have been married for 50 years plus. So when you think about 50 years, I can't because I'm not that old, so I'll need people that are older to explain to me what 50 looks like until I get there. Okay. On the 19th is also, we have a great meet and greet dinner with the Central Nord School Board, again, looking at partnerships and providing kind of a school service for our residents as well. On the 20th is the UDI Luncheon, which is the Urban Development Institute's luncheon. I believe Malcolm Bruce will be speaking at that luncheon, and he is the Executive Director of Empton Global, which is the FDI arm of the Capital Region. So looking for foreign trade and also current expansion of foreign trade that we have in our communities as well. And then 23rd is I believe that's the last transit pop-up, and that'd be at Safeway. So again, take the opportunities to provide some input. We are a growing community. We'll continue to grow and progress our community forward, and we'd like to hear from our residents. So anytime that there's an opportunity, please make sure you do so. And council is always open and willing to have conversations and chit-chat with our residents as well, because the more that we hear from you, the better decisions that we make. So with that, that ends council meeting. Okay, you have something now? Okay, Councillor Matties, go ahead.
I apologize. I knew I had something, but I just couldn't find it before. With regards to the AUMA Sustainability Environment Committee, they're responsible for the AUMA Sustainability Awards. And what is happening is we're getting a lower number of submissions over the last few years. So we are planning to revamp the AUMA Sustainability Awards in 2021. This year we will be keeping the same awards. So I'm hoping that we can provide a submission if we can look at the categories, and because then next year might be something completely different. And then the other thing I would like to comment on is with regards to the FCSS question regarding the meeting in November. So what happened was that there was actually a meeting, but we didn't have quorum. We had a meeting and had discussion, but there was no decisions made at that meeting. So that's why I thought I had been to that meeting, and just wanted to give you an update on that.
Okay, thank you for those updates. I appreciate that, Councilor Mattis, and clarifying the SSS November meeting. Thank you. Okay, with that, council, that ends our council information and council discussion. So we're moving into closed session. Again, closed session, this is FCM update regarding the West Task Force, and that is hosted by our Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and we have the chair of that task force, Ms. Randy Golden. She is a councillor in Yorkton, and it's very good to have her here today. There was a West meeting out here at the airport, and so all the members came in, and she has graciously taken the time to come out to Stony Plain to provide us an update. So thank you for coming, and welcome to our council chambers. Okay, with that, it is a closed meeting, so that means members of the public and people that are not allowed to be here need to leave. There is no decision items that are made in closed session, and we'll have a motion to move out of closed session before we make any motions coming forward. Based on the presentation, it was just for information, so there's nothing to be kind of brought back to the public. If you would like to be notified of when we come out of session, you're welcome to leave it with the recording secretary, and we'll contact you. If not, have a good night, and we'll see you at the next council meeting. Okay, and a motion, Councillor Meyer, please.
I make a motion that we go in camera.
Thank you. And I call the question, all in favor? Thank you. And members of council and staff, we'll give you 8 minutes to get in, go to washroom, and get out if you don't need to be here. agenda, so that was a good little information from the chair of the West Task Force, the Western Economic Solutions Task Force. So I look forward to the report that's going to be tabled in June at the annual FCM conference. With that, members of council, that adjourns the meeting. Well done. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.